Picture this. I'm standing in handcuffs, in my own driveway, on land my family has owned since 1943. The woman who called the cops? She's watching from her mansion window with a smile on her face, thinking she's finally won. But here's the twist: I am the cops. My name is Ezra Blackwood. I'm a 45-year-old deputy sheriff, and this is the story of how my HOA president tried to steal my family farm, destroy my life, and ended up in federal prison instead. Buckle up because this gets wild. It's 6:15 on a Tuesday morning. Steam's rising from my coffee mug as I watch the Montana sun paint the mountains gold. My phone buzzes. It's 911 dispatch. Deputy Blackwood, we have a report that you're trespassing on private property and need to vacate immediately. I actually laughed out loud. What would you do if someone called the cops on you for standing on land your family's owned for 80 years? I pull out my badge. Ma'am, tell whoever called that Deputy Sheriff Ezra Blackwood is exactly where he needs to be. Through my neighbor's window, I can see Karen Peton's face go white as fresh snow. She's still got those expensive binoculars pressed to her eyes like some suburban spy. And that's when I knew this was about to get interesting. Drop a comment and let me know. Have you ever dealt with a nightmare HOA president? Because this story is about to show you just how bad it can get. Let me back up 6 months and tell you how this whole mess started. After 15 years as a deputy sheriff and a messy divorce, I moved back to the family farm I inherited from my grandfather. 40 acres of pure Montana beauty that's been in our family since 1943, when Grandpa Jeremiah bought it with his GI Bill money after the war. This is the kind of place where I learned to fix tractors at 8 years old. Where the old barn still smells like machine oil and decades of honest work. I thought I'd grow old here in peace. Then they arrived. 5 years ago, they built Willowbrook Estates right next to my property line. 47 McMansions with matching mailboxes and seasonal decorative flags. Most residents were actually great neighbors who loved buying fresh produce from my farm stand and watching their kids feed Buttercup. Yes, I named my goat Buttercup, don't judge me. But then there was Karen Peton. 52 years old. Bottle blonde hair that cost more monthly than most car payments. A PhD in art history she mentioned every 5 minutes. And the attitude of someone who confused studying Renaissance paintings with graduating Harvard Law. Her husband Braden owned Peton Construction, the company that built Willowbrook. They lived in the biggest house with a lawn so perfect it probably got more water than my entire vegetable garden. The trouble started on a Tuesday morning in June. Click, click, click. I hear expensive heels on gravel. Karen marches across my property line carrying a manila folder thick as a phone book, her overpowering floral perfume making my chickens stop pecking and stare. Mr. Blackwood, she announces with that condescending tone that makes your teeth itch, I'm here on official HOA business. I wipe my hands on my jeans. Ma'am, I don't believe I'm part of your HO. Her laugh sounds like a car trying to start in winter. Oh, but you are now. When Willowbrook Estates was incorporated, your property was grandfathered into our covenants. She thrusts a certified letter at me like a court summons. You have 30 days to bring this agricultural situation into compliance. I scan the demands, remove the barn, tear down the chicken coop, eliminate the vegetable stand, relocate all unsightly farm equipment. The kicker? $500 a day in fines if I don't comply. But here's what didn't add up. Most Willowbrook residents actually supported me. They'd stop by the farm stand, let their kids pet Buttercup, talk about how nice it was having authentic country life next door. Then I noticed something interesting. Karen keeps glancing toward my land with this hungry look, like she's measuring it for something bigger than HOA compliance. Your little hobby farm might seem quaint, she continues, but it's costing each of us thousands in resale value. That night, sitting on my porch, listening to Buttercup chew grass, I realized something crucial. This wasn't about HOA rules or aesthetic standards. The way Karen looked at my 40 acres. Her husband's construction company. That hungry expression in her eyes. This was about power, control, and land that somebody wanted for reasons they weren't sharing yet. And I had this gut feeling, a woman who'd call 911 on a deputy sheriff standing on his own family land wasn't going to stop with a strongly worded letter. Karen didn't waste time escalating. 3 days later, she filed a formal complaint with the county zoning board, claiming my farm created a public health hazard due to animal waste and attracted rodents. She organized a petition and got 12 signatures out of 47 homes. Not exactly a groundswell of support, but she posted those signatures on the neighborhood Facebook group like she'd won a landslide election. The photos she shared made my neat, well-maintained farm look like a rural disaster zone, all shot from weird angles that made my chicken coop look like a condemned building. But here's where Karen made her first big mistake. She never actually read the HOA's original incorporation documents. See, 15 years in law enforcement teaches you that most people assume someone else did their homework. Karen was banking on that assumption. So I drove down to the county courthouse and requested every single document related to Willowbrook Estates formation. And there it was, buried in subsection 12C of the original incorporation agreement. Existing agricultural operations shall be permanently exempt from all aesthetic and operational restrictions. Permanently exempt. Those two beautiful words meant Karen's entire legal case was built on quicksand. But I wasn't done digging. I called her bluff about public health hazards by requesting an inspection from the county health department myself. The inspector, a no-nonsense woman named Janet who'd been checking farms for 20 years, walked every inch of my property. When she finished, she actually laughed. "Mr. Blackwood, this operation exceeds organic certification standards. I've seen million-dollar operations that aren't this clean." The taste of vindication was sweeter than my grandmother's apple pie. Then something really interesting happened. One evening, Karen's husband Braden quietly approached me as I was closing up the farm stand. He looked nervous, kept glancing back toward his house like Karen might be watching. "Ezra," he whispered, "what would it take for you to sell this place?" I waited. "I'm talking 40% above market value. Cash deal. We handle all the paperwork." Let that sink in. 40% above market value for a property that was supposedly dragging down everyone's home prices? The pieces started clicking together like shells loading into a shotgun. This wasn't about aesthetics or property values. Karen and Braden wanted my land for something specific, and they were willing to pay premium prices to get it. "Thanks for the offer," I told Braden, "but this farm isn't for sale at any price." His face fell. "Look, between you and me, Karen gets these ideas in her head, and once she's committed." He trailed off, but the warning was clear enough. The community reaction was swift. The local newspaper ran the story, and suddenly I had neighboring farmers stopping by to offer support. 3 Willowbrook families publicly withdrew their signatures from Karen's petition. My law enforcement training kicked in full force. I started treating this like any criminal investigation. Every interaction with Karen got documented. Every conversation recorded, Montana being a one-party consent state. Every piece of correspondence filed and copied. Karen's response to losing community support was predictable. She got louder and more desperate. She started posting daily updates on social media about the ongoing agricultural crisis in Willowbrook, complete with photos taken through telephoto lenses that made me feel like I was under surveillance. But something beautiful was happening too. The families who'd withdrawn support started shopping at my farm stand regularly, bringing friends and neighbors. Word was spreading that there was this local farm where you could get the best tomatoes in the county while supporting a deputy sheriff who wasn't backing down from a bully. By the end of that first month, Karen had made a critical tactical error. Instead of keeping this quiet and handling it through backroom deals, she'd made it public. And desperate people make stupid mistakes. 2 weeks later, Karen filed a false police report claiming I had threatened her with violence. I was actually on duty when the call came in. My sergeant looked at me with that expression cops get when paperwork doesn't make sense. "Blackwood, Karen Peton says you threatened to deal with her permanently. Care to explain?" I pulled out my phone and showed him the body cam footage I'd been recording. What we saw was Karen doing 90% of the yelling while I stood with arms crossed, asking her politely to leave my property. The closest thing to a threat was me saying I'd deal with this through proper legal channels, which in Karen's panicked mind apparently became a death threat. My sergeant shook his head and filed it in what we call the crazy neighbor folder. That same afternoon brought animal control to my door. Karen had reported dangerous livestock threatening public safety. The officer took one look at my 3 chickens pecking peacefully and Buttercup chewing grass by the fence, then turned to me with that look people get when they realize they've been pranked. "She said you had aggressive farm animals." I was expecting something with fangs, not a goat that's trying to make friends with my boot. But Karen's masterstroke came next. She started parking her BMW directly across my farm stand entrance during peak hours, claiming she was monitoring traffic safety. The woman complaining about too much traffic was literally creating a traffic jam. My security cameras captured everything: Karen sitting in her luxury car with a clipboard, writing down customers' license plates like some kind of suburban secret police. Here's something I'd learned from 15 years of handling domestic disputes: documentation always beats confrontation. Instead of giving Karen the screaming match she wanted, I filed harassment and obstruction complaints with time-stamped photos and video evidence. But I kept digging deeper into public records, following that nagging feeling about Braden's generous cash offer. What I found in the county planning office made everything crystal clear. Preliminary development sketches for a luxury subdivision expansion that included 40 acres filed 6 months before Karen's first complaint. This wasn't random HOA harassment. This was a calculated business strategy to force me off land they needed for their next project. The ironic result? Karen's campaign transformed my quiet farm operation into the county's most popular weekend destination. People drove from neighboring towns specifically to buy vegetables from that deputy sheriff who's standing up to the HOA bullies. What started as Karen trying to destroy my business had turned into the best marketing campaign I could have asked for. But I had a feeling both cents diesel from my tractor and her expensive perfume would be sticking around for a while. By month 3, Karen had hired Harrison Kemp, an expensive attorney from the state capitol who charged $500 an hour and specialized in what he politely called property value protection. Their nuclear option? A civil lawsuit claiming my farm had caused $200,000 in diminished property values across Willowbrook Estates, demanding an emergency injunction to shut down all farming operations immediately. The lawsuit was professionally crafted intimidation, designed to bury me in legal costs until I gave up and sold. What Kemp didn't know was that I'd been building my own legal team. My ex-partner Sarah had become a prosecutor and was feeding me intelligence. "Ezra," she told me over coffee, "this guy's pulled the same stunt in 4 counties. He bets on people not being able to afford the fight." But I could afford the fight because I had something better than money. I had documentation. And a growing suspicion that this whole mess was bigger than one crazy neighbor. So I started following the money trail the way I'd learned to track down drug dealers. What I found changed everything. Patton Construction had used identical harassment tactics against 3 other rural property owners in neighboring counties over the past 5 years. The pattern was always the same: identify properties adjacent to potential developments, use HOA pressure to force below-market sales, then flip the land to shell companies for massive profits. Every single victim had eventually sold their family land for a fraction of its development value. The district attorney's office was very interested in this pattern. "This isn't just neighbor disputes," the DA told me, spreading my research across her conference table. "This is systematic fraud with a paper trail." While I was building a criminal case, Karen was building her own downfall. Her behavior had become increasingly unhinged. Midnight property line inspections, photographing my customers' license plates, filing complaints about everything from excessive chicken noise to threatening vegetable arrangements. The woman was documenting her own harassment campaign and didn't realize it. Her biggest mistake came when she tried to bribe County Building Inspector Bob Martinez to condemn my barn as structurally unsafe. Bob had inspected that barn twice in 5 years and knew it was solid. So when Karen slid an envelope across a coffee shop table, he immediately called the sheriff's department. "She offered me $2,000 cash to find violations that don't exist," Bob reported. "I've seen some desperate people, but this lady's lost her mind." The bribery attempt was Karen's first provable felony. But my prosecutor friend Sarah convinced me to hold off on arrests. "Let her keep digging," Sarah advised. "Every move she makes gives us more evidence. Desperate people make bigger mistakes." The community response had grown beyond my wildest expectations. Local veterans organized weekend farm support rallies. 3 neighboring counties contacted me about similar harassment cases, turning my personal fight into a regional movement for rural property rights. But the real game changer came when Karen made her fatal error. Convinced she was about to lose everything, she started spreading rumors that I was dealing drugs from my farm stand. She filed false police reports claiming to have witnessed suspicious late-night activities involving unknown vehicles and exchange of packages. She was describing people buying vegetables after work, but her reports were serious enough to trigger a DA investigation. When federal agents showed up at my farm, They found exactly what they expected: an off-duty deputy sheriff growing organic tomatoes and raising chickens. What they didn't expect was a complete file of evidence showing systematic harassment by a woman who'd now filed false reports with multiple agencies. The lead agent, Detective Riley, reviewed my documentation and shook her head. "Deputy, you've got enough evidence here for federal fraud charges. This isn't neighbor drama anymore. This is organized criminal activity." That night, I realized Karen had crossed the line from civil harassment into federal crime territory. But I still didn't know just how deep her crimes went. 3 months into this nightmare, I was in the county law library researching HOA precedents when something nagged at me. Why hadn't Karen's lawyer produced the actual incorporation documents during their lawsuit? Every legitimate organization keeps those papers handy. So I decided to pull Willowbrook Estates' complete filing history myself. What I found made my hands shake. Karen Peton had never legally established the HOA. Not even close. The manila envelope should have contained incorporation papers filed with the Secretary of State, registration numbers, mandatory insurance bonds, state-required financial oversight procedures. Instead, I found a handful of neighborhood meeting minutes and a photocopied template downloaded from some website. For 5 years, Karen had been collecting dues and imposing fines through what amounted to a book club with delusions of authority. But the real bombshell came when I subpoenaed the financial records through the DA's office. Every penny of collected HOA money, over $300,000, was sitting in a personal checking account labeled K. Peton Administrator. No separate business entity. No board oversight. No audit procedures. Just Karen's private bank account, funded by her neighbor's monthly payments. The bank statements read like evidence in a fraud case. Luxury vacation to Europe, charged as HOA conference. BMW payments filed under administrative costs. Their pool renovation billed as community improvement project. Karen had been using HOA money as her personal credit card for half a decade, confident that nobody would ever question her authority long enough to discover she didn't have any. I sat there surrounded by evidence of systematic embezzlement, finally understanding why Karen had fought so desperately. This wasn't about property values or suburban aesthetics. This was about protecting a criminal enterprise that had been funding her lifestyle since day one. Every false police report, every harassment campaign, every desperate attempt to destroy my farm, it had all been Karen trying to prevent exactly this moment. The legal implications hit me like a freight train. Operating a fraudulent corporation while collecting money under false pretenses carries federal charges. Wire fraud, tax evasion, embezzlement. Karen was looking at serious prison time. Here's the beautiful irony. Every single Willowbrook resident could demand full restitution of every penny they'd ever paid because they'd been victims of an elaborate financial scam. Every fine Karen had collected was fraudulent. Every assessment notice was issued without legal authority. She'd been running a neighborhood protection racket and calling it community management. When I called Sarah at the prosecutor's office, her reaction was everything I'd hoped for. "Ezra, this is Prosecutor Christmas morning. We've got 5 years of documented fraud with a paper trail that leads straight to Karen's personal bank account." The revelation also explained Braden's increasing nervousness. He knew his wife was sitting on a financial time bomb that could destroy everything they'd built. Now I understood why Karen had escalated so dramatically. Every challenge to her authority threatened to expose the whole fraudulent operation. She couldn't back down because backing down meant financial ruin and federal prison. The morning after my discovery, I walked into DA Sarah Hawthorne's office with 5 boxes of evidence and a plan that would turn Karen's world upside down. Sarah spread the financial records across her conference table, shaking her head. "Ezra, your neighbor's been running a criminal enterprise disguised as community management." The charges were adding up. Embezzlement, fraud, filing false police reports, attempted bribery, tax evasion, federal wire and mail fraud. "The beautiful thing," Sarah explained, "is that she documented everything herself. Most criminals try to hide evidence. Karen framed hers and hung it on the wall. But we needed more than charges. We needed a strategy that would expose Karen's crimes publicly while protecting the community she'd been victimizing." That's when I remembered something from my patrol days. Sometimes the best way to catch a criminal is letting them think they're about to win right up until the handcuffs click shut. Instead of arresting Karen immediately, We decided to let her continue digging her own grave. She doesn't know we've discovered the financial fraud, Sarah explained. Every day she operates her fake HOA, she commits fresh crimes. Every threat, every fine, every official document adds more charges. The Willowbrook residents were discovering they had rights they'd never known existed. When word spread that they could legally stop paying dues, 43 households immediately suspended payments. Better yet, they could demand full restitution of everything they'd paid, money that was still traceable in Karen's personal accounts. Karen had scheduled what she called a mandatory emergency meeting for all residents, planning to announce new enforcement measures and increased fines. The irony was delicious. She was committing fresh crimes while planning to accuse me of wrongdoing. I coordinated with local media. Channel 7's investigative team recognized this as the perfect example of HOA abuse and wanted to document Karen's downfall in real time. If we time this right, reporter Janet Walsh explained, her fake meeting becomes her public confession on live television. My final preparations were simple but crucial. Backup deputies positioned around the community center. Detective Riley from the State Fraud Division with federal arrest warrants. The bank had already frozen Karen's accounts. The beautiful trap was that Karen's own desperation had created the perfect scenario. She'd scheduled her fake meeting to demonstrate authority she'd never possessed, planning to threaten people with laws that didn't apply, all while federal investigators documented every fraudulent word. That evening, sitting on my porch with Buttercup grazing nearby, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Karen Peton was about to learn the hardest lesson of her privileged life. Real authority can't be faked, and stolen money always has to be repaid. The Willowbrook Community Center buzzed with nervous energy as residents filed in for Karen's emergency mandatory meeting. She'd threatened legal action against anyone who didn't attend her final presentation of evidence against my criminal agricultural operation. 80+ people packed the room, residents, media, and several unfamiliar faces who'd later reveal themselves as federal investigators. I slipped in wearing full uniform and took a seat in the back, my badge catching the fluorescent lights. Karen spotted me and her eyes flashed with what she thought was victory. She'd arranged poster boards covered with photographs, printed charts, and manila folders bulging with what she called irrefutable proof of criminal conspiracy. "Ladies and gentlemen," Karen announced, her voice carrying that familiar condescending tone, "tonight we expose the agricultural terrorism that has infected our community like a cancer." For 20 excruciating minutes, Karen presented her evidence with the confidence of someone who'd lost touch with reality. Blurry photographs of families buying tomatoes, which she claimed showed drug transactions with coded hand signals. Audio recordings of normal farm stand conversations, which she insisted contained criminal communications in agricultural code language. Bank statements showing my legitimate farm income, which she waived as proof of money laundering. The audience grew increasingly uncomfortable as they realized their neighbor had been documenting their every visit to my farm like some kind of suburban secret police. "But here's the smoking gun," Karen declared, reaching her crescendo while pointing directly at me. "Deputy Ezra Blackwood has been using his law enforcement position to protect his criminal enterprise and intimidate honest citizens who dare to speak truth to power." She turned to face the crowd with theatrical flair. "I call upon this community to make a citizen's arrest of this corrupt deputy sheriff." The room fell silent. No one moved. Several residents looked embarrassed for Karen as the weight of her delusions became clear to everyone except herself. That's when I stood up and walked slowly to the front, my boots echoing in the silent room. "Good evening, everyone," I said calmly, my voice carrying the authority of 15 years in law enforcement. "I'm Deputy Sheriff Ezra Blackwood, and I believe Miss Peton has been expecting me." Karen's expression shifted from triumph to confusion as I continued. "Miss Peton, you've just provided an excellent demonstration of why you're under arrest for embezzlement, fraud, filing false police reports, and operating an illegal organization." I pulled out the arrest warrant, watching her face transform from confusion to horror. "Karen Peton, you have the right to remain silent." The room erupted in gasps and shocked murmurs as handcuffs appeared in my hands. "This is impossible," Karen screamed, her voice cracking with panic. "I'm the victim here. I have legal authority. I run this HOA. You can't arrest me." "Actually, ma'am, you never had any legal authority," I replied, securing the handcuffs as Karen struggled against reality. Your HOA was never legally incorporated. Every fee you collected, every fine you imposed, every official document you issued was fraudulent. Detective Riley from the State Fraud Division stepped forward with federal warrants. Mrs. Peton, you're also under federal arrest for wire fraud, mail fraud, and tax evasion, totaling over $300,000 stolen from your neighbors. Karen's public breakdown was complete and devastating. This is a setup. You're all part of the conspiracy. I was protecting property values. The crowd's reaction was swift and cathartic. Spontaneous applause broke out. Mrs. Patterson stood to declare, "That woman has terrorized this neighborhood for 5 years. Today, justice finally came home to roost." But the real shock came when Detective Riley addressed the stunned residents. "Ladies and gentlemen, you've all been victims of systematic fraud. Every dollar you paid in HOA dues went into Ms. Peton's personal bank account. You're entitled to full restitution plus damages." The taste of justice was sweeter than my grandmother's apple pie as Karen was led away in handcuffs, her cries of innocence echoing through the parking lot. Local news provided live coverage of her perp walk, broadcasting her downfall to households across Montana. As the community center emptied, residents lingered to shake my hand and share their own stories of Karen's harassment. The mountain air outside smelled like freedom itself. 6 months later, justice tasted even sweeter than I'd imagined. Karen Peton received 3 years in federal prison, $400,000 in restitution payments, 500 hours of community service, specifically working on organic farms. The judge's poetic justice wasn't lost on anyone, especially when Karen's lawyer argued that farm work constituted cruel and unusual punishment. The Willowbrook residents recovered an average of $8,000 each in stolen fees. Families used their restitution for home improvements, children's college funds, and long-delayed vacations. The community formed a legitimate HOA with proper incorporation, transparent finances, and by unanimous vote, a permanent bylaw protecting agricultural operations. My farm evolved into something I'd never dreamed possible. What started as a quiet place to heal from my divorce became a thriving community hub bringing urban and rural families together. The farm stand expanded into a cooperative featuring products from neighboring farms. The annual Blackwood Harvest Festival became the county's biggest event, raising $25,000 for agricultural scholarships. Personal happiness found me too. Dr. Sarah Martinez, the veterinarian who'd started visiting during the harassment campaign, became my partner in every sense. We're planning a wedding next spring, right here among the apple trees Karen once wanted destroyed. The legal precedent from our case revolutionized property rights across Montana. The legislature passed the Rural Property Protection Act, requiring HOA transparency, proper incorporation, and agricultural exemptions. 3 other states adopted similar laws after rural advocacy groups used our victory as a blueprint. Karen's criminal behavior had accidentally protected thousands of farmers she'd never meet. Even Braden Peton rebuilt his reputation through radical transparency. After publicly apologizing and making restitution to previous victims, he now specializes in farm-friendly developments that preserve rather than eliminate existing agricultural operations. The Montana Public Television documentary about our case sparked national conversations about HOA reform and launched a movement protecting property owners nationwide. Today, as I write this with Buttercup grazing in evening sunlight and the aroma of Sarah's homemade bread drifting from our kitchen, I'm grateful for every minute of Karen's harassment campaign. Her attempts to destroy my peace gave me exactly the life I never knew I wanted: community connections, purposeful work, lasting love, and the satisfaction of standing up to bullying wherever it appears. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. It's building something beautiful that helps your whole community flourish. Karen taught me that bullies reveal their own weakness through their desperation to control others. But she also taught me that ordinary people have extraordinary power when they refuse to be intimidated by fake authority and fraudulent threats. Now I want to hear from you. What's your HOA horror story? Drop a comment below and share your experiences with neighborhood tyrants who think they can push people around.